In this world, killing monsters grants power. The strongest gather thousands of skills, becoming near invincible. But one man could hold only 7. What seemed like weakness became his greatest strength, for his 7 skills could evolve without end. Even a small healing spell grew until it could restore lost limbs. From that day, people gave him the nickname of 7 Stars. It was through this power that Hansu managed to join humanity's strongest group of 4 in his 20s, yet even their combined might could not halt the demon's relentless assault. Soon, humanity across the world was driven to extinction. In the end, only the 4 of them remained. To prevent this catastrophe at its very source, they turned to humanity's final trump card, Alcinia's time-space crystal, a legendary relic said to possess the power to reverse time and return to the past. But it could send only one person back. Hansu, who had begun training 20 years later than the others, yet had still managed to match their pace, was chosen as the most suitable candidate. They believed that if Hansu had discovered his potential earlier and chosen 7 powerful skills from the very beginning, he might have been able to avert this disaster entirely. As Hansu stood upon the altar preparing to activate the formation, the church roof was suddenly ripped apart by a golden dragon. Upon spotting them, the beast raised its head, gathering a destructive breath within its jaws. Keldian ordered Hansu not to lose focus, then stepped forward and summoned a massive formation to block the incoming strike. Immediately after, he shouted for Iris and Cain to switch positions, since only he possessed the ability to activate the teleportation circle. At his command, Iris dashed forward with vigorous strides. Reaching the ground directly beneath the golden dragon, she slammed her staff into the earth. In an instant, a brilliant shield of light rose upward to protect them. Cain followed immediately, swinging the greatsword in his hands as flames surged across his body. With a single devastating sweep, he cut down several lesser dragons in an instant. Yet the golden dragon remained completely unharmed. Its massive claw swept downward toward Cain, who had no time to evade. He braced himself, raising his sword to block, but the crushing weight of thousands of pounds of force spread through his body. Hansu instinctively reached for his sword to rush forward and help, but Keldian stopped him, commanding him to stay focused. Iris turned back briefly and told Hansu leave this fight to them. She urged that once he returned to the past, he should not act alone anymore, but instead seek out trustworthy teammates. Hansu promised that he would do his best. Then Keldian also reminded him that while unnecessary killing could be avoided, those who instigated wars had to be dealt with, especially the mad sovereign Clementine. No matter what, that man had to be eliminated. As they spoke, the teleportation formation neared completion. The time-space crystal began to resonate as it sensed the arcane fluctuations. The next second after the magic fused with the crystal, the formation successfully activated. Iris and Cain turned back to see it, their once tense expressions replaced by relief. When Hansu opened his eyes again, he found himself standing among a crowd of people. He looked and recognized the all-too-familiar scene around him, confirming that he had truly succeeded in traveling through time. At this moment, the people nearby were in complete chaos. They looked around at the strange scenery with no idea of what had just happened. Their panic was understandable, for they had just been pulled into an alternate dimension. At this time, the phenomenon of missing people had only just begun appearing in the real world. Originally, Hansu too had only learned after being transported here that all the previously missing people had ended up in this place. This world, existing within an intermediate zone, was deeply influenced by the abyss formed through devouring other dimensions. Those who had arrived earlier had gained supernatural abilities ahead of the rest, making their passage through this realm completely unobstructed. Moreover, every corner of this place was filled with strange beasts. After all, once humans had been transported to this world, the Abyss Gate would inevitably open. The Great War began from that very moment. Thinking of this, Hansu examined his body and discovered that all of his previous skills and physical attributes had indeed been reset to 0. The time left for him to grow stronger was approximately 5 years. However, he also knew that that guy should appear around this time as well. Just as Hansu finished this thought, a crack opened in the sky and something black began to emerge from within. Once it fully emerged, everyone could see clearly that it resembled a small demon, introducing itself as an assistant fairy but does not look like a fairy to me. It claimed to be here to help everyone accelerate their progress. But Hansu understood what accelerating progress truly meant in its words. It meant reducing their numbers quickly through infighting. The fairy first welcomed everyone to this alternate world, but before it could finish its introduction, someone interrupted, shouting at it to cut the nonsense and send him home immediately. Upon hearing this, the sprite's expression instantly darkened, its voice sharp as it demanded to finish speaking first. Terrified, the man fell silent and did not dare to utter another sound. The fairy continued, declaring that this place would grant everyone unlimited freedom. It asked if they had ever fantasized about a world without laws, ethics, or morality. Here it said, they could do whatever they wished. Not only that, now even the physical limitations that had once bound humanity had vanished. From this point on, they could grow infinitely stronger according to their will, just like the heroes in their movies. To prove its words, the fairy snapped its fingers. The body of the man who had interrupted earlier exploded instantly. The sight shocked the crowd, filling them with fear so intense that many struggled even to breathe. With its cheerful smile returned, the fairy declared that it disliked noisy people who talked too much. After a brief silence, panic erupted and people began fleeing in all directions. Yet with each snap of its fingers, those who had shouted about escaping were torn apart one after another. Roaring, the sprite reminded them that it had already said it despised noisy people. Terrified into obedience, the remaining crowd immediately covered their mouths, not daring to make a sound. The next moment, the fairy reverted to its smiling tone once again, stating that in this world, as long as one killed any living creature or anything else, it would drop runes. As it spoke, it extracted a white stone from a corpse. Then it explained that besides this type, there were 8 other similar stones, all randomly dropped. Although the one in front was the lowest grade white rune, as long as everyone worked hard to grow in the future, they could obtain better runes. The fairy held up the rune to examine it, explaining that this was a rune that could enhance strength, and asked if anyone wanted it. Everyone immediately backed away upon hearing this, afraid of making the little creature unhappy. At this moment, however, Hansu pushed through the crowd and walked out. Raising his hand to look at the rune before him, he couldn't help but sigh that it had been a long time since he had used something like this. The fairy was stunned for a moment, then it flew to Hansu's side, remarking that this was very good and that he should participate actively in this way. It had him extend his hand and asked whether he could feel how magical it was now. The fairy explained that the rune would distort the laws to enhance strength. From a scientific perspective, with his original strength, Hansu could only lift 117 kg of objects, but now it had increased to 122 kg. Not only that, but runes could also. Before it could finish, the fairy stopped abruptly because it noticed Hansu was neither curious nor excited at all. This Hansu is just build different guys anyways. The fairy then stated that runes would have different effects depending on their type, and the more runes one obtained, the more powerful they would become. It emphasized that the only way to survive was to continuously collect runes to make oneself strong. As soon as these words were spoken, the fear on people's faces was replaced by greed. The next second, they began competing to grab the runes that had just fallen on the ground, but the fairy absorbed those runes back into its hands, declaring that it would keep these runes for itself and that they should go find new ones. This greatly disappointed those who had almost grabbed the rune. The fairy continued by instructing them that by touching their right ears they could open their personal information panels to view the runes they already possessed. Everyone tried this and discovered that a panel would indeed appear. The fairy added that humans' average initial stats were all 10. Hansu checked and saw that after using that rune earlier, his strength had increased by 1 point. The sprite then announced that to help everyone adapt quickly, it would provide many benefits. Immediately afterward, everyone suddenly felt something heavy in their hands. Looking down, they discovered weapons had appeared from nowhere. After declaring that the tutorial was over, the fairy disappeared on the spot. Suddenly, someone shouted for the others to look behind them. Everyone turned to see that a group of goblins had appeared not far away. These goblins became extremely excited upon seeing the humans. People who sensed something was wrong had already started running toward the back of the crowd. Hansu watched as the goblins moved closer, their faces now clearly visible to everyone. A girl cautioned against provoking them, suggesting they slowly retreat. However, after only 2 steps back, the people at the rear abruptly stopped. Everyone turned to see that they were blocked by an invisible wall, which sent the crowd into panic. Adding to their fear, the wall was continuously contracting inwards. Similarly, a wall behind the goblins was also closing in. Suddenly, someone pointed out a nearby door that appeared to lead outside, also noticing a number displayed on it. After one person exited, the number on the door changed to 48. People quickly realized that the door might only allow 50 people to escape. They began running frantically towards the exit. Hansu found the situation laughable. He thought that if 100 people united to fight, their chances of winning would be quite good. He remembered that in his previous life in this place, 40 people had died at the hands of the goblin. But now, things were different, and they needed to quickly eliminate these goblins to proceed to the next stage. At that moment, the goblins, sensing the humans' fear, charged towards them. Screams echoed through the crowd. Hansu managed to kill one goblin, but another was already attacking him from above. Hansu gripped its wrist and sliced it in half with a single stroke. This action caught the attention of the surrounding goblins. Hansu assumed a ready-to-strike pose, deterring the other goblins from advancing. He lamented that this decades-old body was too uncomfortable to use, feeling tired after killing just 2 goblins. However, his luck seemed to be improving, as his agility increased by 0.1%. He knew that as agility improved, reaction speed also increased. Suddenly, a goblin behind Hansu took advantage of his distraction and threw a dagger at him. However, due to his recent agility boost, Hansu heard the sound of the air being cut and quickly turned his head. While dodging the strike, he also threw his short blade towards the goblin. The short blade precisely hit its head, killing it instantly. Seeing Hansu kill their companions one after another, the goblins chose 3 of their own to launch a coordinated attack on him. However, in Hansu's eyes, they had become walking runes. As he quickly passed by them, all 3 fell to the ground before they could react. Although his stats had been reset to 0, his combat experience and memories from his previous life remained intact. The other people were stunned after seeing Hansu kill several goblins in succession. However, this also showed them that these monsters could indeed be killed, so the battle between both sides officially began. Hansu quickly joined in, slaying the goblins before him. Actually, there was no need to be so urgent from the beginning, but he could not waste time here because many humans already existed in this world. People who had just arrived would have a 3-month newbie protection period. As long as they stayed within designated areas, they would not encounter veteran players, but after 3 months they would have to fight against those with 2 or 3 years of experience. Therefore, Hansu needed to use this time to become stronger. Keldian's decision to send him to this point in time was truly the most correct choice. Before long, the battle came to an end. Looking at the corpses around him, others could not believe that Hansu had killed more than half the monsters by himself. At this moment, the Fury appeared again. It looked around and remarked that the results here were quite impressive and that the number of people had been reduced appropriately. After saying this, it removed the surrounding invisible walls and then crawled back into the void crack. After it left, everyone dared to curse at the empty air. Hansu opened his information panel to check and discovered that his attributes this time were much stronger than in his previous life. He had also obtained a weapon. Next was figuring out how to quickly become stronger. He remembered that in his previous life, Keldian had mentioned there was a hidden dungeon within the tutorial area, a brutal dungeon. However, Keldian had not been able to reach the end back then and believed no one could clear it during the newbie period. Nevertheless, he had said that even so, he had gained enormous benefits from it and his current ability to be among the Valkyrie squad members was thanks to that. Keldian had also said that if he could return to the past, he would definitely conquer that dungeon first, which might have allowed him to defeat Hansu. With this in mind, Hansu prepared to set out to find the hidden dungeon, but he needed to handle something first. That was to find the 2 hidden fragments that Keldian had told him were concealed within the tutorial area. Just as he was about to leave for the location of the first fragment, he suddenly heard an argument behind him. It seemed a girl was being bothered by a group of men. The men were using the pretext of unity for survival to try to keep the woman with them, while the woman's companions behind her did not dare step forward to help, seeing they were outnumbered. Hansu did not want to get involved in such matters because the hidden fragments would automatically disappear after 1 week, and he had to obtain them before then. Suddenly a Gotti behind him called out his name. Hansu turned and asked if he knew him. Hearing what he said, those 2 guys were obviously very surprised. The blonde kid stepped forward and questioned whether Hansu was stupid, asking if he had forgotten that they had been together before being transported here. Finally, after 1 minute, he remembered they were his classmates. In his previous life, when they had been hanging out together, they were transported here. Back then, they died directly in the first round. It should be because Hansu had killed more than half the goblins that they had managed to survive. The girl, upon seeing Hansu, directly shook off the man's hand with force. Then she turned and ran toward him. Compared to the others, Hansu recognized Ella at first. The men initially wanted to use forceful methods, but when they saw Hansu's face clearly, they stopped in their tracks, clearly remembering the scene of him single-handedly taking down a group of goblins. However, thinking it over, one of them assumed that Hansu might now be exhausted, so he quietly signaled to his subordinates. After they approached and surrounded them, he declared that they would definitely take Ella today. Hansu simply walked up to him and, in an icy tone, demanded that he repeat those words. Sensing Hansu's intense killing intent, the man unconsciously stepped back 2 paces. Hansu strode forward directly and knocked him aside. When the man turned around, his veins bulged instantly as he prepared to make a move. In response, Hansu drew his short blade and asked whether the man had something to say. Just then, their leader came over, claiming they were not bad people and suggesting they travel together since having more people meant better mutual support. From this man's eyes, Hansu could easily see that he had already adapted to the rules here. The nature he had originally hidden would make people like him thrive like fish in water after losing constraints. Just as Hansu gripped his dagger wanting to eliminate them, he suddenly remembered Keldian saying to avoid unnecessary killing and Iris advising not to act alone but to find some teammates. After thinking this through, he suppressed his killing intent. Even if he did not intervene, guys like them would bring about their own destruction, so Hansu turned and left the place. One subordinate wanted to step forward but was stopped by the leader who wanted to establish his own order here. After this incident, the blonde kid felt that humans here were more terrifying than goblins. Then he looked toward Hansu, realizing that he seemed completely different from before. Previously seeing Hansu as an orphan who always sat alone in corners day after day, he had thought him a weakling. At this moment, he ran forward and asked why Hansu had pretended not to recognize them earlier. Faced with such a question, Hansu did not know how to answer for a moment. Finally, he made up an excuse, saying that he had amnesia. Then Hansu turned his gaze to Ella nearby. Although she had lived quite well in the real world before this, beauty was a double-edged sword. After Hansu led them for a while, the blonde girl behind could not help but ask where they were going. Ella too was very curious. Hansu told them that they had arrived and that they could see for themselves. Everyone looked up and discovered they had come to a subway station entrance. At this moment, Ella asked what he had brought them here to do. Hansu, thinking it was troublesome to explain, reflected that if not for Iris's words, he would have chosen to act alone. Finally, having no choice, Hansu told them that although he had amnesia, he had gained supernatural abilities as a result. Because of that, he felt there were good things down below now that various monsters existed, and claiming to have supernatural abilities should be reasonable enough. The blonde girl behind asked her companion if it was really safe to follow Hansu. Hearing this, Hansu turned and stated that they didn't have to follow him since he respected personal choice. Even if they just watched from behind afterward, it would be fine with him. After hearing this arrogant tone, the blonde kid felt very annoyed, but at the same time he thought Hansu might really know something. After consideration, they decided to follow him. As the atmosphere grew increasingly eerie, the blonde kid ran over and asked if they were going somewhere safe now. Hansu told him they were not. Instead, they were going to meet friends who had been living here for a long time. Hearing this, the blonde kid looked completely incredulous, unable to believe that anyone would live in such a place. We are now then introduced to this blonde kid. His name is Tyler. No, not that Tyler. After walking a bit more, Hansu suddenly he drew his dagger from behind, and before anyone could react, he swung the blade toward Tyler's feet. Under everyone's terrified gaze, he cut a worm crawling by Tyler's foot in half. Tyler was so frightened that he didn't dare breathe. Hansu explained that these were green worms, creatures that would emerge after sensing vibrations from the ground. If bitten by them, losing a chunk of flesh would already be considered fortunate. After explaining this, he picked up the rune dropped by that green worm. Then, he taught them a simple method to eliminate such creatures, by watching the ground, and if soil bulged upward somewhere, stabbing directly down. After learning this technique, the others felt it was as simple as whack-a-mole. However, the guy with headphones still hesitated to act. Just then, a patch of earth behind him bulged into a mound, and in the next second, another green worm burst out, charging toward him. Fortunately, Hansu discovered this in time and quickly flashed over to push him away, then simply swung twice to chop the green worm to pieces. Tyler came over and asked how Hansu knew these things. Hansu simply replied that it was his supernatural ability. Everyone was half believing, but Ella's eyes showed clear admiration. After hunting for a while longer, the ground became covered with runes. When Hansu bent down to collect them, he noticed that the others were still standing behind him. Turning back, he asked why they weren't collecting the runes. Ella explained that they thought it would be better for Hansu to absorb them so he could level up and then protect them. Even if they absorbed these runes now, they wouldn't immediately become stronger like him. Hansu sighed and explained that runes obtained through one's own efforts must be absorbed by oneself. If they wanted to continue traveling with him, they had to follow this rule at the minimum. He clarified that this rule had been established by those who had wandered in the abyss for decades in his previous life to ensure coexistence among companions. To reduce unnecessary conflicts, whoever killed prey would own the dropped equipment. Relationships established in this environment, Hansu told them, were like a leaking boat that could capsize at any moment. They should understand this principle after some time. He added that they should trust their own abilities most, because if they were useless, they would certainly be abandoned. Such were the rules of this world. After hearing his words, they all trembled inwardly. Nodding to each other in agreement, they began searching the ground for dropped runes. Hansu knew well that after they became familiar with this place, they would grow mad in their pursuit of runes. Just then, Tyler suddenly picked up a purple rune. Instinctively, he felt that this rune was extraordinary. The panel showed it was called the Essence of the Acral Tribe. Thinking of something, Tyler turned back and looked at Hansu warily. Although Hansu had readily agreed to share earlier, if he wanted to fight him for this rune now, Tyler might not be his match. So he tentatively asked if the rune belonged to him. What Tyler did not expect was that Hansu nodded in agreement quite readily. This rune was indeed valuable in the early stages. After absorption, it could provide players with the defense and regeneration abilities needed for survival. It was similar to a passive skill, making it quite popular. Although it would greatly increase the user's appetite, food could easily be taken from others once one became stronger. In this world, skills and proficiency were all determined according to rune grades. Some people with strong abilities and abundant magical power possessing hundreds of skills was not strange. For example, Keldian, whom Hansu knew, had over 1,000 skills in his previous life. But this was where Hansu differed from others. Originally, he had also tried to absorb more runes, but every attempt failed. Iris had also tried many methods, finally concluding that he could only absorb 7. She had once said that if she had known this earlier, she would have had him learn more powerful skills. Although this limitation was his fatal weakness, it was also his incomparable advantage. It allowed his 7 skills to evolve infinitely. What was originally just a rapid regeneration ability from a Delora lizard essence later evolved to have the same effect as Kane's immortal divine technique. What started as a simple dash eventually reached the level of tearing through the void. Back then, they had given him the nickname 7 Star. It was precisely because of this ability that even though he had started 20 years later than them, he could still catch up to their pace and even surpass them. The main reason they chose Hansu to return to the past was this ability. So in this life, he absolutely could not afford to make mistakes. He remembered Iris's words clearly. She had said that he must carefully select and then learn these 7 skills. Here Tyler began absorbing after seeing that Hanzo had no objection. The next second his panel showed that his physical resistance had improved with current proficiency at 1%. Seeing this, he quickly opened his information panel to check and found that his other abilities had also improved. This made him secretly think that Hanzo was a fool for giving away such a good item to others. He believed that at this rate he would definitely surpass him. Hanzo continued leading them downward. Ella, growing curious, asked why they were still going down. Hanzo replied that they were going to take the subway. Ella questioned if subways could still be running in this kind of world. Hanzo told her that she would know once they arrived. He was certain because that man's intelligence had never been wrong. In his previous life, when they were discussing how to quickly become stronger, that man had said that dungeons alone were not enough. He explained that there was something essential in the tutorial area and that thing refreshed in the subway. Although each station's location and structure were different, every subway station had 3 underground levels. By going through the teleportation gate in the middle of the stairs to the bottom level, one would find a subway that had never departed. Boarding that subway meant success, but doing so was extremely difficult. According to that man, the subway would only stay there for 1 day, so Hanzo knew he had to obtain the hidden fragment within today. After they descended, they indeed found a teleportation gate ahead. Ella hesitated, asking if they really had to go in since it looked very dangerous inside. Hanzo replied as usual that he had simply followed his instincts here, and if anyone wanted to go back, they were free to leave at any time. Having tasted success earlier, Tyler said without hesitation that he wanted to go in. Ella immediately followed, saying she would go as well. Seeing her anxious expression, Hanzo thought that she must have understood at least one truth, that a girl as beautiful as her would face greater dangers in the future. If she wanted to survive, she had to become stronger. The blonde girl and her companion chose to remain behind to. Then the guy with headphones spoke in a low voice, saying that he also wanted to go down together. Hearing this, Tyler mocked him, asking what he was going for when he had been too scared to even move earlier. The guy with headphones raised his head and coldly stated that it was none of Tyler's business and his decisions had nothing to do with him. Feeling his authority challenged, Tyler roared that the guy had leached too much experience earlier and warned he might not take care of him if they encountered danger. At that moment, Hanzo interrupted, ordering them to stop arguing. He reminded them that time was running short and they should decide for themselves. With that, he walked toward the teleportation gate. The guy with headphones and Ella followed closely behind. Tyler, gritting his teeth, cursed them in his heart for daring to ignore him in front of Ella. However, he still followed them through the teleportation gate. Upon entering, Hanzo saw the convenience store inside and confirmed that it was indeed the right place. According to that man, the second level of subway stations always contains some kind of reward mechanism, such as a convenience store. While Tyler searched around for defensive weapons, Hanzo went to the kitchenware section and picked up a pot. Ella came over and curiously asked what he was doing. After preparing the pot, Hanzo took out a leather pouch and explained that he was cooking. When Ella asked what was inside the pouch, he poured it into the pot, saying it was greenworm blood. She wondered why he had collected such a thing, only to see him also take out goblin skin, preparing to add it in. Hanzo knew that goblins had evolved poison resistance over time to counter green worms. When these two were mixed, they could create an even more powerful poison. Seeing Hanzo cooking, Tyler ran over and asked if he could have a bite. When Hanzo told him it was highly toxic, Tyler immediately jumped back 2.5 meters. Ella, surprised that he even knew such things, asked how he had learned it. Hanzo replied as usual that it was due to his supernatural ability, claiming this related knowledge naturally appeared in his mind. What they didn't know, however, was that to learn this knowledge in his previous life, Hanzo had gone through hell. Keldian had once said that no matter who returned to the past, advancement would be extremely difficult without intelligence. Intelligence was the most important trait. He had also warned them never to tell this information to others, because such knowledge from the future would only accelerate the abyss's erosion speed. Even so, after so much time had passed and since Hanzo had not studied seriously back then, he had forgotten the exact proportions of the formula and the precise heating time. Looking at the bubbling mixture in the pot now, he thought it should be fine. He poured out the shower gel from the shelf and then filled the empty shower gel bottle with the poison, making it convenient to apply. Ella, standing behind him, asked if they could use this poison. When Hanzo told them yes, they were initially delighted, but in the next moment, he added that 1 strength rune would be the cost for 2 applications. Tyler cursed him for being despicable, profiteering even in a situation like this. Hanzo calmly replied that he could also give it to them for free. But from a long-term perspective, he knew clearly that relationships built upon one-sided giving were fragile and easily broken. Ella asked if she could use the poison first and give Hanzo the runes after earning them. Hearing this, Hanzo handed her the shower gel bottle filled with poison and reminded her to be careful not to get it on her hands, as it would be very painful. Then the other two came forward under the same conditions. While they were applying the poison to their weapons, Hanzo turned to collect necessary supplies and packed them into a small backpack. When he saw them hoarding several boxes, He reminded them that if they wanted to act as bait, then sweeping everything clean like that would certainly attract attention from others. He told them to leave some items appropriately and even taught them to bury unnecessary items in the dirt. After hearing these words, Ella's admiration for Hansu grew even stronger.
Stop! You're making me blush!
At the same time, she wondered when she would gain supernatural abilities like his. She knew they might have to remain in this world forever, and to survive, they had to hurry and level up by fighting monsters. Currently, the fastest and safest way was to follow Hansu. With that thought, she quickly caught up to him. Seeing Ella walking so close to Hansu made Tyler, who liked her, very unhappy. He tossed his pack to Danny, telling him to help bury it, then caught up to Hansu and asked if they could also obtain supernatural abilities like his. Hansu turned back and said that maybe they could. Upon hearing his affirmation, all three became serious and asked again if it was true. When Hansu repeated his positive response, their faces instantly filled with joy. Hansu hadn't lied either. It was said that among those who came to the alternate dimension, a few did indeed obtain special abilities not found in the real world. But what they didn't know was that ability users were often the most dangerous, willing to use any means against those around them to grow stronger. At that moment, Tyler came again, asking why Hansu was usually so aloof and spoke so little. Hansu, turning away, explained that he was simply used to it, since in the final 5 years before his time travel he had faced the monsters of the abyss every single day. He stated that it was during that time humanity realized its insignificance, as hope gradually turned to despair. Tyler, listening, thought to himself that Hansu was merely showing off. He believed that if Hansu didn't have that supernatural ability, he wouldn't be worth following. But he also thought that if he followed long enough and grew stronger, he could eventually take Ella and go solo. Before he could finish his thoughts, Hansu suddenly raised his hand, stopping everyone. He crouched down and found a puddle of slime on the ground. He examined it carefully. There was no acidic smell or organ fragments, so it was not from zombies, nor was it from sword snail. Based on his deduction, it was most likely left by land mermaids. Though these monsters moved slowly, they secreted a toxin that rapidly induced paralysis. Falling into their hands meant being torn apart in seconds. However, Hansu had already thought of a countermeasure. He led them to gather beer bottles and crafted Molotov cocktails. Although gasoline was not available, he found substitutes with other flammable chemicals. At this moment, Tyler provoked him again, remarking that compared to the original world, Hansu seemed to prefer it here, since he could do whatever he wanted. He began to add that if he had supernatural abilities, then before he could finish, Hansu fixed him with cold eye. If Kelbian had been there, he would have eliminated Tyler without hesitation, though Iris, who was destined to save countless people, would have intervened to stop it. Finally, Hansu sighed and thought to himself to forget it. He then laid out the battle plan. One person would throw Molotov cocktails in front, while the remaining 3 would follow with finishing blows. Those fighting at the front would hold priority rights to distribute the runes. Upon hearing this, Tyler immediately volunteered for the front line. When Hansu asked who would throw the Molotov cocktails, both Ella and Danny raised their hands at the same time. Hansu instructed them to decide among themselves. Danny, sweating under Ella's intense stare, thought he could hardly compete with her for the role, though he was also terrified of close contact with the monsters. When neither side could settle the matter, Hansu decided that they would take turns throwing the cocktails. As they ventured deeper, Danny grew increasingly frightened, though he dared not voice any desire to retreat. He wondered whether Hansu and Ella truly felt no fear. When he looked up, he saw Ella's head trembling uncontrollably, which strangely balanced his own fear. Suddenly, Hansu stopped walking and warned them to heighten their alertness, as the creatures were approaching. The moment his words fell, the sound of flesh scraping against the ground echoed from the darkness ahead. Hansu instructed Ella to throw a Molotov cocktail toward the source. Though terrified, Ella kept reminding herself to be stronger. The bottle left her hand, arcing through the pitch-black space, before smashing to the ground. The erupting flames illuminated a hideous, terrifying face as fire engulfed the land mermaid, burning it thoroughly. Hansu immediately drew his weapon and ordered Tyler to follow him for the finishing blows, warning him not to touch the paralysis toxin they secreted. With a swift step, Hansu charged forward, striking down one creature instantly. Then he spun and delivered another strike, obtaining 2 runes in succession. Meanwhile, Tyler, who had been dazed nearby, was startled by a land mermaid lunging at him. In a panic, he swung his blade wildly, failing to land a vital strike. Tyler had not expected that even such a strike would drain the land mermaid of its life force. This made him marvel at how effective the poison crafted by Hansu truly was, as merely scratching the surface of their skin proved lethal. Seeing this, Hansu asked whether the poison he had given was worth the runes. But Tyler remained immersed in excitement, convinced that with this weapon he could quickly surpass Hansu. During the battle, Elena continuously lobbed Molotov cocktails toward dense concentrations of land mermaid. Those that slipped through or tried to approach were struck down by Hansu, who advanced swiftly. Tyler followed behind, finishing off the weakened creatures. The situation developed exactly as Honshu had anticipated. The paralysis toxin of the land mermaids possessed high flammability, making the Molotov cocktails the most effective weapon. After cutting through them for some time, Honshu noticed his weapon had dulled. Fortunately, the poison enhancement allowed even a light scratch to be lethal. Tyler felt it was like playing a video game, becoming more excited with each kill. At one point he spotted 2 runes nearby and quickly bent to pick them up. But as he reached out, a land mermaid hidden in the shadows spat toxin at him. His reflexes saved him. The toxin struck his pants instead, instantly corroding them away. Behind that creature many pairs of glowing eyes appeared. Alarmed, Tyler shouted for Ella to throw Molotov cocktails in that direction. But when Ella opened her pack, she realized they were all used. With no choice, Tyler called to Donnie to switch places and throw the next volley. Trembling, Donnie fumbled with his lighter repeatedly.
Oh my god, bro.
Anyways, when it finally sparked, it illuminated a terrifying face directly beneath his feet. Startled, he dropped both the cocktail and the lighter. Tyler, watching, erupted in anger and cursed Donnie furiously. At that moment, Honshu arrived, slashing down the monster beneath Donnie's feet before it could strike. He told them all to calm down and reminded them that if they followed the plan there would be no problems. Then he instructed them to rest while he returned to the battlefield, promising to clean up and gather the runes. Hearing this, the group collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Thanks to healing runes, Tyler's wounds had fully recovered. Honshu explained that once Tyler's stamina reached a higher level, his injuries would heal even faster, and told him to take his share of the runes. Tyler, standing, looked at his pile of runes with disappointment, feeling it was too small. Glancing at Donnie, he thought that if he took Donnie's share he would grow stronger faster. Acting on the thought, he approached Donnie, accusing him of being heartless. Before Donnie could react, Tyler locked his throat in a chokehold. The frail Donnie was powerless. Tyler claimed that Donnie couldn't even throw a single cocktail properly and had nearly gotten him killed. Donnie wanted to retort that Tyler's greed for runes had caused the issue, but Tyler's tightening grip silenced him. Alana urgently told Tyler to release him, warning that Donnie would die. Seeing his intimidation succeed, Tyler finally threw Donnie aside. As he moved to seize Donnie's runes, a throwing knife embedded itself in the ground before him. Honshu warned him coldly that those runes did not belong to him. Tyler argued that giving such power to a weakling was no different from throwing it away. He sneered that Donnie's presence was meaningless and suggested splitting everything equally with Honshu. But Honshu simply reminded him calmly that they had agreed beforehand and must distribute fairly. Nothing that did not belong to them could be taken. Knowing he was no match for Honshu, Tyler rose angrily and walked off. Honshu then told Donnie he needed to learn to protect what was his. At that moment, Ella hesitated, then asked Honshu if he found them annoying or burdensome. She admitted she had noticed that he could easily defeat the creatures alone. Honshu reassured her that he did not judge them for lacking certain skills. She then asked whether he would continue traveling with them, confessing that she often felt as if he might leave at any moment. Without turning, Honshu replied that whether they could keep up was their business, but all 3 had performed well, so there was no need to worry. While cleaning the battlefield, Honshu found that most of the runes dropped were stamina and strength, ideal attributes for the early stages. This made the harvest satisfying. Opening his information panel, he saw his strength and stamina values nearing 50. After absorbing another, the total finally reached 50. Suddenly the fairy appeared, congratulating Honshu for achieving his first milestone with combined values over 50. The fairy recognized him as the one who had raised his hand to request runes before and began chattering endlessly. It said that hardworking individuals were always appreciated and small rewards were given to the most proactive. At this point, Ella trembled as she asked if this system wasn't unfair since everyone had different starting points. The fairy comforted her at first, saying early sprites would not kill or attack players, but then it added that exceptions always existed, perhaps she might be one. Seeing her face pale, the fairy laughed heartily, clutching its stomach, and teased her for being clever yet saying such naive things. The sprite told Honshu that he too possessed superior qualities compared to others, and yet he had not erased those superior parts just to be the same as everyone else. Life, it explained, had no fairness at its core. After saying this, it bounced back to Honshu's side, announcing that it was time to distribute the reward. Honshu already knew that the first person whose ability values surpassed 50 would receive the reward of choosing 3 desired runes. The sprite asked what runes he wanted. With a snap of its fingers, a recovery rune appeared in its hand. It asked how this one was, explaining that although it was single use, it could restore even if the stomach were pierced, essentially serving as a resurrection skill. The others were shocked, realizing how powerful such a rune was. All 3 of them thought at once that if they ever fell into mortal danger, Honshu would surely choose the recovery rune to save them. But Honshu knew that if limbs were severed, the rune would be useless. So he asked instead if there were runes that resisted magic. The fairy had not expected that question. Nevertheless, it conjured several runes from its magic circle, confirming that such runes did exist. Yet unless it was a special case like Kane's exceptional recovery rune, both magic resistance and physical resistance runes were absolutely unobtainable within the tutorial zone. Stamina runes only increased activity and recovery speed. After choosing, Hanshu absorbed the runes and opened his panel. His magic resistance value had reached 13, meaning at least he could avoid instant death from a sudden magical strike. Satisfied, the fairy prepared to leave, encouraging him to continue working hard. Finally, it blew a playful kiss and teasingly called him cutie pie. The three companions behind him were stunned. They had not expected the terrifying fairy to actually be female. Seeing their expressions, Hanshu told them brusquely to stop staring and to move on. In the following time, their initial fear and awkwardness faded. Combined with the runes they had obtained earlier, progress became smoother. During this, Tyler noticed Hanshu crouching on the ground, assuming he was preparing more poison, but he soon realized Hanshu's speed had not changed, despite absorbing the most runes. Curious, Tyler approached and asked why his speed had not increased. Hanshu rolled up his sleeve, showing the runic patterns on his wrist. The others stared in curiosity, asking what they were. Hanshu explained that runes could be collected by focusing on the ones desired, which would then be stored as patterns attached to the arm. When they asked how he knew this, he told them, as always, that it was his supernatural ability. Ella also wished to try, but Hanshu warned that learning this would not benefit them. Strength would not increase rapidly, hunting speed would decrease, and if they died, the stored runes would drop intact upon their bodies. Danny, confused, asked why Hanshu would collect them this way then. Hanshu replied that it was for future exchange. He already knew that although trading was not yet possible, once the tutorial ended, runes would gradually become currency. He advised them to use all the runes they obtained on themselves instead of storing them. Hearing this, Tyler asked displeasedly whether Hanshu was looking down on them. If he could do it, why could they not? Hanshu sighed, thinking to himself that this man had no self-awareness, and resolved that only through hardships would they learn. But before that, his priority was to organize his equipment. Calling them over, Hanshu ordered them to listen carefully. Whether they continued downward with him or stayed to hunt above, he would not interfere. But in this place, they must follow his commands. He then ordered them to hand over their weapons. Tyler protested, demanding why he should surrender his blade when Hanshu already had one. In response, Hanshu tossed his dull weapon to the ground, stating it was no longer useful and he needed backups. Tyler retorted by asking what they would fight with if he took all the blades. Did he expect them to simply watch from behind? Surprisingly, Danny thought that was a good idea and offered his weapon immediately, only for Tyler to stop him sharply. Seeing Tyler's attitude, Hanshu asked if he intended to fight in the next level's combat. Tyler, still feeling strong, insisted that Hanshu always underestimated them and declared he would definitely fight. Hanshu thought silently that once they saw what was waiting below, their confidence might shatter, but if they went, he would be forced to protect them. So Hanshu gave them two choices. Either he would stay and let them fight alone, or they would stay behind and allow him to fight alone. Danny immediately chose the latter, not wanting to participate. Ella quickly followed, reasoning that since Hanshu warned them, it must be dangerous. Tyler tried to persuade them otherwise, insisting that precisely because it was dangerous they should fight together. But Hanshu could tell the selfish man's real intent. He wanted to abandon the weak and monopolize the rewards. He thought Danny's presence meaningless, and without Ella, he would have no one to witness his efforts. Inwardly, Hanshu mused that Tyler was lucky the one reborn was him and not Keldian, or else he would have been smashed apart, pieced back together, and smashed again. Unable to reach a decision, Hanshu told them to descend first and decide afterward, as his time was short. At this, Tyler smiled smugly, convinced that Hanzu's wish to go alone meant the rewards below were exceptional. Only fools, he thought, would give up such treasures. But shortly after descending, they scrambled back up in panic. Ella blamed Tyler, saying she had warned him it would be dangerous. Tyler roared back, asking how he could have known. They had just seen a creature far beyond the earlier monsters, a colossal serpent over 30 meters long. Though terrified, Tyler glanced back down, muttering that he would be insane to face such a beast alone. Meanwhile, Hanshu fixed his gaze on the serpent, which returned the stare with cold, unblinking eyes. Slowly, it raised its head, its throat swelling with a massive lump. Recognizing the posture, Hanshu immediately dodged behind a stone pillar and clamped his hands over his ears. A second later, the serpent opened its massive maw and unleashed a devastating red shockwave. The blast struck where Hanshu had stood moments before, then surged forward to obliterate the pillar shielding him. Hanshu had anticipated exactly this type of attack. Fortunately, Hanshu had chosen magic resistance earlier, or else even the aftershock of the serpent's magic would have been unbearable. He knew clearly that this monstrous serpent could unleash not only devastating magical shockwaves, but also possessed scales so hard that ordinary blades could not cut through them. Yet he also knew its weakness. With this thought, Hanshu darted out from behind the stone pillar. He evaded the sweeping tail with swift movements, then leapt high, forcing his dagger in reverse along the serpent's scales. The blade slid into the vulnerable gap between them, piercing flesh. The serpent shrieked toward the sky in pain. Not pausing to retrieve the weapon, Hanshu retreated quickly, maintaining safe distance. The enraged serpent lunged, but Hanshu dodged aside. It raised its head again, spitting another roaring red shockwave. The blast missed, yet the ringing in his ears dulled his perception. By the time he realized the serpent's tail was sweeping toward him, it was too late. The strike connected, hurling him aside. The serpent believed that blow would shatter him, but when the smoke cleared, Hanzu stood. Only the skin of his forehead scraped. The serpent trembled, realizing its attack had failed. Blood still flowed from the wound where the dagger remained, poison working its way inside. Though its defense was unmatched, its resistance to poison was weak. For a beast of such size, however, a single poison dagger was insufficient. Fortunately, Hanzu had collected 5 or 6 more blades. His ice-blue pupils gleamed coldly, sharper than any weapon. At the brink between life and death, the serpent loomed like the world collapsing. Far above, Ella, Tyler and Danny felt the earth shake. Even at their distance, the sounds reached them. Fear gripped Ella, who wondered if Hanzu could truly handle such a beast alone. Tyler told her to keep moving since they no longer had weapons and planned to return to the convenience store. But Elena refused, staring back. After a moment's hesitation, she turned and declared that she would return to him. Furious, Tyler had no choice but to follow, Danny trailing reluctantly. When they descended and saw clearly, Ella froze. Hanzu was trapped within the serpent's colossal jaws, its teeth tearing into his arm. Yet his expression remained calm as he drew another dagger, stabbing deep into the creature's lower jaw. The serpent roared and released him. Now 3 blades, all laced with deadly toxin, had been driven into its body. Poison coursed through the massive serpent. Its trembling grew worse. Hanzu's stamina runes worked to heal his injuries slowly, giving him confidence. He knew that later magical beasts would resist toxins, but for now, poison was the most efficient weapon. Soon the serpent collapsed, its body stilling as life fled. The 3 rushed over. Ella anxiously asked if he was all right, while Tyler stared at the corpse in speechless shock. Hanzu only questioned why they had returned. Ella admitted she had been worried, asking about his wounded arm. He told her it was a mere scratch that would heal. Tyler could barely process the sight, realizing at last the insurmountable gap between them. Hanzu then began dissecting the serpent. From its body he extracted a skill rune. Barbed Snake's Shockwave. It was a valuable skill, particularly if paired with magic runes. However, since Hanzu had absorbed none, he had no intention of using it. When Tyler asked about it, Hanzu stated plainly that he would not use the rune. Immediately, Donnie asked timidly if he could have it. Before he could say more, Tyler shoved him aside, insisting the rune should go to him instead of a coward. Donnie argued that Tyler already had a rune, but Tyler snapped that trembling in the back made him useless. Their voices rose, tension mounting. Ella attempted to mediate, but her words had little effect. Just as the 2 prepared to fight, Hanzu ordered them to stop. He reminded them that he had never promised to give it away. Instead, he declared that he would sell it, offering them a 5% discount if they bought it now. The 3 were stunned, asking if they could pay in installments. Hanzu replied that someone would need to guarantee them, so they should guarantee each other. After some discussion, the 3 decided the rune would go to Ella. This result was exactly what Hanzu had anticipated. Neither man trusted the other, leaving only Ella. Besides, he had already noticed she had absorbed magic runes, making her the natural choice. Afterward, the 3 handed over their collected runes to Ella. She approached Hanzu and explained that together they had pooled 3 agility and perception runes and 7 stamina and strength runes each. Hanzu reduced Ella's payment by 1 strength rune, reminding her that he had promised a 5% discount. Ella remarked that he was truly meticulous. Turning away, Hanzu stated firmly that they should not think he was being excessive. In a place like this, he explained, those who became accustomed to getting something for nothing would quickly lose their lives. There was no such thing as a transaction without cost in this world. Although Ella felt his words were harsh, she also knew they were true. After that, Hanzu began searching the area for a specific material. The presence of the thornback serpent meant that there had to be juttle and ore nearby. During the earlier battle, he had already noticed traces of the ore in the surroundings. Crouching down, he first collected some, then began working with it continuously. Watching from behind, Tyler and Ella assumed he was once again using some kind of supernatural ability to create something. Their curiosity overcame them, and they approached to find the metal in his hands, surprisingly malleable as though he were molding it into spikes. Once he had finished shaping them, Hanzu quickly stood and retrieved the daggers he had previously embedded in the serpent. The others watched expectantly, wondering what remarkable item he would forge this time. Next, Hanzu extracted several of the serpent's internal organs. Tyler asked if he was preparing poison again, but Hanzu replied that this time was different, offering no further explanation. He knew the serpent's scales, though extremely tough, could not be used directly as weapons. Instead, based on knowledge from his previous life, he recalled that both the serpent's organs and scales were essential for solidifying the malleable juttle and ore. The resulting weapon would not have wide damage range, nor cause bleeding or secondary damage. However, if the wielder knew an opponent's weakness and possessed the skill to strike it directly, it would become the most powerful weapon possible. Since the spike was hand-shaped, the tip was not sharp enough, so Hansu tested its hardness with a dagger and confirmed it could indeed be sharpened into something formidable. Alchemists in the previous world had spent great effort to create such effective weapons from low-tier materials during the early stages. While honing the tip with his dagger, Hansu thought to himself that this weapon would allow him to break through the defense of the creature he would soon face, when claiming the second hidden fragment. After wrapping cloth strips around the handle to form a hilt, the weapon was finally complete. At that point, Tyler stepped forward once more and asked if Hansu would sell him the weapon, offering all the runes he had in exchange. Judging by the careful craftsmanship, Tyler assumed the weapon's power far exceeded that of his own. Hansu replied that though he would have gladly sold it, the solution was already used up and he could not craft a second one. Refused, Tyler silently cursed him for selfishness, though he chose to endure for now, believing there might be better things further ahead. He also reasoned that this place must be the final destination. The subway still had electricity, was unexpectedly clean, and even Hansu, usually so vigilant, appeared to relax. That could only mean there were no threats here, only reward. When Hansu stepped into the subway and the others tried to follow, he abruptly stopped them, asking what they thought they were doing. He told them that only one person could proceed here, and the rest had to remain below. Seeing them hesitate, he repeated the warning with the same cold tone. The three exchanged baffled looks. The spacious seats around them seemed more than enough for everyone. They questioned how Hansu could possibly claim that only one person could enter. They also challenged him, asking why they should retreat just because he ordered it. Had they not fought together until now? Why was he suddenly acting alone? They even insisted that they had helped him greatly along the way. Upon hearing their protests, Hansu found it laughable. Although these people had chosen the wise path of following him and seizing opportunities, they still failed to grasp one fundamental principle. It seemed he would have to teach it to them personally. He rose, weapon in hand, and declared that there were no rules preventing them from entering. Then he struck the other end of his weapon heavily against the ground, adding that there were no laws in this world. He gave them two choices: either step down or fight him here and now. With that, Hansu suddenly raised the weapon, its spike gleaming, and aimed it toward them, demanding they make their decision quickly. Faced with this killing intent, they had no choice but to step off the train. From outside, they could only watch helplessly as the subway doors began to close. Tyler was especially displeased. Listening to Hansu's tone earlier, he thought the man sounded more like someone in his 40s than a peer. A dangerous thought crept into his mind, that if the three of them attacked together, they might actually defeat him. If they succeeded, all of Hansu's weapons and runes would be theirs. Even if they lost, they could apologize afterward, and surely Hansu would not kill them all. But the moment Tyler's hand began to move toward his weapon, he looked up and froze. His heart trembled violently as he saw the killing intent radiating from Hansu's otherwise expressionless face. Those eyes were more terrifying than the goblins they had fought earlier. In that instant, Tyler knew without doubt that if he made one wrong move, Hansu would kill him without hesitation. Just before the subway doors sealed shut, Hansu stated coldly that he would see them above. Ella, being the more reasonable of the three, admitted that they had made excessive demands from the start. She reminded them that without Hansu they would never have survived to this point. She believed they should have listened to him from the very beginning. With that, she urged the two men to hurry and leave with her. But Tyler did not share her view. In his heart, he dismissed both Elena and Danny as fools destined for failure. To him, there was nothing wrong in wanting to become stronger. That thought alone consumed him. He would stop at nothing to achieve it. Meanwhile, seated within the subway, Hansu began organizing intelligence drawn from his previous life. He recalled three key truths about this trial. First, the subway would pass through 20 stations, stopping at each one. Second, random artifacts would appear at every station. Third, it was impossible to return to a station once it had been passed. Even so, Hansu knew that reaching the final stop did not guarantee valuable rewards. Careful judgment was needed to choose wisely and know when to step away. By the time Hansu reached the 12th station, he noted that the previous weapons had all been obtainable through hidden fragments and were fairly good. When the subway stopped again, Hansu slowly stepped off the car. On the platform, his eyes widened in surprise. Sitting there was a box of Madman's Cloud cookies. He had not expected this item to appear here. From the first bite, while chewing, rune coefficients would steadily rise, and upon swallowing, the user would receive 10 minutes of full attribute enhancement with a 20% boost. He immediately picked it up. This was exactly the kind of item he wanted. Though it could not be used outside the tutorial zone, there was nothing better within. The sight brought back old memory. He remembered how in the past, whenever he ate one, that woman would appear and ask why he was eating such a thing again. She would insist that it was unsuitable for him and say that this time she would become stronger and prevent disaster. After securing the cookies, Hansu returned to the initial station, finding it empty. He concluded that Ella and the others had already left on their own. With 4 days remaining until the next fragment appeared, he considered the best way to improve quickly, either by focusing on hunting and collecting runes, or by challenging the remaining tasks for reward. Though task difficulty and content were random, he decided to begin with those that offered worthwhile rewards. One such task came to mind: though only a madman would attempt it. Completing it would yield an imitation philosopher's stone, crafted by a novice magician, an artifact capable of enhancing all abilities simultaneously and even instantly healing fatal wounds. Such an item was rare even in the tutorial, much less the Crimson Zone. He recalled from his previous life that a girl named Annalyn had once entered a prison as a volunteer, only to be dragged into the abyss when the tutorial began. Though she had been kind to everyone there, she was betrayed by them all. Her trade had awakened in anger, and within 7 days she had slaughtered every criminal, tearing out their hearts. Finally, driven completely mad, just as she prepared to end her life, this very task appeared. This time, Hansu's purpose was to save as many as possible, so he chose to preserve that task for later. Glancing at the time, he saw it was already 9 hours. He thought of another decent task, the Pouch of Endless Gluttony. To obtain it he would need stamina, as it could only be acquired under moonlight and would require long effort. When Hansu returned to the convenience store intending to eat, he discovered the place had been completely ransacked. Even the food he had buried in the ground was dug up and stolen. Moon was about to rise, yet someone had dared to act so boldly. He resolved to see just how far their boldness went. Meanwhile, at the subway station entrance, a large group of people was moving cargo. Ella and her companions could only watch from a distance, not daring to intervene, especially since even their supplies had been stolen. Danny analyzed the situation, admitting that although their group was strong, the opposition had several times their numbers. Even with higher ability values, 2 fists could not defeat 4 hands. This shocked Sarah, who had never heard Danny speak so much at once. What puzzled Ella was how the group had even discovered the convenience store. When they finished looting and prepared to leave, the leader suddenly turned and waved with a smile. While most of the group looked confused, Tyler alone was startled. When Sarah asked if the man had just greeted them, Tyler quickly denied it, claiming he was merely taunting. He then urged them not to start conflict and suggested they leave, adding that since everything was gone they should just search elsewhere. As he turned away, cold sweat broke out on his face. He cursed the gang leader under his breath for waving at him. No one else knew it, but Tyler had already met with this group in secret. He had revealed the location of the convenience store, even offering to guide them there. Initially, the gang leader had suspected a trap, but Tyler had silenced him by grabbing him with one hand and striking him with a fist as large as a sandbag, sending the man flying over 2 meters. That one blow had shattered the leader's suspicion. Tyler had then arrogantly declared that he was already on another level and would never bother laying traps for weaklings beneath him. Back in the present, Elena, Danny, Sarah, and Tyler found a small room at the subway entrance to rest. When Hansu appeared, Elena called him over. His return gave her a sense of relief. Tyler, however, kept silently reminding himself not to panic, as no one knew his betrayal. Once inside, Ella explained that when they went to pick up Grace and Sarah, the looters had completely ransacked the convenience. Hansu asked how much food remained. Ella pointed to the table, saying they had managed to save only a little in the chaos. At that point, Tyler interjected, suggesting that now that Hansu was back, he could simply take the food back from the thieves. Though Hansu might not have been able to defeat them if he went alone, he did not answer Tyler's demand. Instead, he only chuckled softly and suggested that they should eat something first. Being ignored and mocked once again, Tyler ground his teeth audibly. Enraged, he rushed over and slammed his hand against the table in front of Hansu, insisting that this arrangement would not work. Tyler declared that the food had been obtained at the risk of their lives, and if Hansu wanted to eat, he would have to pay the corresponding price or trade something in exchange. Ella turned to Tyler and asked what was wrong with him, reminding him that they had brought this food for everyone to share. But Tyler still refused to provide anything freely to Hansu, claiming that it was because Hansu himself had once stated that one could not get something for nothing. Sarah nodded in agreement with Tyler's words. Tyler, thinking to himself, believed this was his chance to seize control. If everyone supported what he said, then Hansu would have no choice but to yield. He wanted to see how long Hansu could maintain his arrogance. Hansu directly told them that he had nothing left to trade for food. Tyler, clearly disbelieving this, claimed that Hansu could use whatever he had obtained from below to trade instead. Sarah, curious, asked what Hansu had gained underground. Before Hansu could respond, Tyler immediately answered for him, saying that Hansu had entered a mysterious space during his time below and must have obtained many treasures. Since they were traveling together, Tyler argued, those goods should naturally be shared with everyone. As he spoke, he even handed Hansu a piece of chocolate as if to tempt him. Hearing this, Hansu chuckled again and remarked that Tyler had learned quickly, but still did not understand. He did not have time to play games with them now. So, after leaving behind the words that they should take care of themselves, Hansu stood and opened the door to leave. Seeing this, Sarah quickly urged everyone not to fight, then told Ella to come with her to call Hansu back. But Tyler tried to stop them, saying they should not intervene, as it had been Hansu's choice to walk away. In his mind, once Hansu was gone, he could finally become the leader. However, the 2 women ignored Tyler's words and insisted on going after Hansu. As Ella was about to step outside, Tyler quickly asked if she intended to abandon them and go with Hansu. Ella stood frozen for a moment in thought before resolutely running out of the store. She grabbed the hem of Hansu's clothes and asked if he could take her with him. Her eyes were full of expectation, her heart pounding rapidly, but Hansu told her that he could not take her with him. Upon hearing this, Ella's mood plummeted and her hand released his clothes. Just then, Hansu added that he had already said before, whether she could keep up was her own matter. Upon hearing this, Ella's sorrow instantly shifted to joy. At that moment, however, Tyler rushed outside to interfere, declaring that Ella could not leave. His reasoning was that although Ella had repaid her share of runes, Danny's portion had not yet been given. To his surprise, Danny spoke from behind him saying it was fine because he too had chosen to go with Hansu. As Danny moved toward the door, Tyler blocked him and demanded to know if he understood what he was doing. Tyler threatened him, asking if he thought his father would spare Danny's father. He reminded Danny that he had once saved him from being a vagrant on the streets, and now he dared to defy him. But Danny was no longer the same as before. He explained that they could not leave this place at all and those outside did not even know they were alive. So how would Tyler ever report back to his father? At this point, he said, it no longer mattered, and he no longer needed to obey Tyler's every word. After saying this, Danny walked around Tyler and continued toward Hansu. Tyler had never imagined that his former lackey would now dare to oppose him. He roared at all of them to get lost, declaring that the food was there anyway. He was convinced that once they left, they would not live any better than staying, and he believed they would eventually return to beg him for mercy. After they had walked some distance away, Danny asked if it was really all right not to bring any food. Hansu, noticing a clothing store nearby, told Danny it was fine. He explained that Tyler's actions had been meaningless. While Danny and Elena turned their heads, they saw that Hansu had already changed into completely new attire. Hansu told them they still had tasks to complete and urged them to move quickly. After walking for some time, Danny still could not understand what Hansu was thinking. He wondered why, if Hansu was so powerful, he did not simply take the food from Tyler by force. He worried that if something happened to Hansu, he would have made a grave mistake by following. But Hansu only needed to glance at him to know exactly what he was thinking, for his thoughts were practically written on his face. It was not Danny's fault, since he did not know about the moon. Seeing that the time had come, Hansu stopped and remarked that it was nearly midnight. Both Danny and Elena were startled, not understanding what he meant. Then, when Ella looked up, she was terrified. She saw that the moon looked strange. What had appeared normal before now seemed ready to crack open. The next second, an eyeball opened on the surface. The entire moon had become a glaring eye. After the apocalypse began, while others scrambled to scavenge food from supermarkets, Hansu had chosen to hunt monsters and cook them, for his rebirth had already revealed the truth to him. He knew that when the moon rose, all food people held in their hands would turn to sand. Moreover, each person would emit a faint white glow visible to others even through walls, only vanishing at a certain distance. Behind him, Danny asked if Hansu had known all along. Hansu only smiled slightly and said that he had not known. At this moment, sounds of fighting and shouting echoed from the nearby buildings. From the general noise, it was clear people were accusing one another due to the sudden disappearance of food. Ola realized then that making everyone visible was meant to drive them to kill one another. Hansu had previously warned them not to hoard too much food, for only food personally claimed would vanish. Any uncollected or undiscovered supplies remained unaffected. Thinking of this, Hansu led the two of them onward toward his destination. Meanwhile, Tyler, who had driven them away, stared in shock at the sand covering the table. Sarah asked what they should do now and suggested searching for other food. Grace added that all the supplies from the convenience store had already been taken. Tyler was convinced that Hansu must have known this would happen beforehand, which was why he had left without taking food. Suddenly, Sarah screamed for Tyler to come quickly. Looking outside, they saw a group of people gathering on the street, searching for something. Upon closer look, it was the same group Tyler had tipped off during the day, leading them to strip the convenience store. Yet now there seemed to be even more of them than before. Tyler understood immediately. If they attacked together, he would have absolutely no chance of surviving. Seeing that the situation looked bad, Sarah suggested that they should go find Hansu, but Tyler, with his pride, naturally refused. Sarah urged him to look at the situation clearly, pointing out that if they stayed like this, they might not even keep their lives once the other group found them. Yet, understanding Tyler's nature, she offered him a way out, suggesting that if the enemy group could not find them, they could instead go look for Marcus. At that time, they could follow behind and support him. Wouldn't that be good? Since Tyler responded better to persuasion than threats, he was indeed moved after hearing this. He thought that taking such an opportunity to make Hansu owe him a favor would not be a bad idea. Just as he was about to slip out through the back door, his feet were suddenly entangled by a mass of green liquid. He stumbled and fell heavily to the ground. Struggling, he realized he could not remove the substance, so he called desperately for Sarah and Grace to carry him and run quickly. At that moment, someone appeared on the street, mocking them by asking whether dragging along the man on the ground was really a good idea, and if they thought they could run far like that, the speaker was the gang leader from earlier that day. The two women who had been wavering already felt his words made sense. After exchanging glances, they decisively abandoned Tyler and ran off. The gang leader crouched down before Tyler, telling him to stop shouting. He explained that the substance binding him was called five-ring adhesive. While Tyler's group had been busy with their own affairs, his own men had not been idle either. With more people, they had been able to secure decent drops. He then asked Tyler where the other three companions had gone, since only three remained here. Seeing Tyler's reluctance, the gang leader suddenly stomped his right foot on the asphalt ground, creating a crater. The display of power terrified Tyler, who had believed himself to be the only one constantly hunting monsters and acquiring runes.